Hi everyone, Tom Richardson here doing virtual DBT for the moment. So today we're going to be doing the last module of Interpersonal Effectiveness. We're going to be talking about validation. Okay, now this is a word that you've probably all heard of, or you've probably experienced it hopefully when you had DBT with an individual therapist. So what we're going to talk about today is how to validate others in terms of improving your relationship with others. I think an important thing to think about is also how to validate yourself, because a lot of you would have maybe got into the habit of being quite invalidating of yourself. For example, saying, I shouldn't feel this way, I shouldn't feel like that. That's the wrong way to think about it, okay? When you were introduced to DBT, you probably spoke a little bit about what we call an invalidating environment. So this is when you're younger, a lot of people might have experienced from different people, maybe not intentionally, invalidating environment. So this is where people are told that how they feel about something isn't right, their emotional reaction isn't wrong. And this might be quite subtle, it might be unintentional, people saying stuff like, you know, big boys don't cry, or good girls don't ask for help, or try not to think about it, that kind of thing. But over time, the problem with that is it ends up making you question your own emotions, and question whether you can cope with them, and that can lead with some of the problems of emotional dysregulation that we've talked about a lot in DBT. So in interpersonal effectiveness so far, we've talked about dear man, give fast. So these are about ways to be assertive, ways to stick up for your needs, whilst also thinking about other people, whilst also thinking about the needs of the other person. So trying to be compromised, dialectical with other people as well. So we're going to talk about validation, what it is, how to validate other people. This can be a really, really important tool to improve your relationships with other people. Whenever I train other staff about DBT, I always talk a lot about validation, how to do validation. And I often get a lot of people coming back from training and saying, I used it with my patients, yes, but I also used it with my family, I used it with my partner, and it's really helpful. Okay. So if you go to page 54 in your book, no, 53 first actually, 53, you'll see this handout here called validation. Okay, so let's just talk through this a little bit. So what is validation? Okay, so validation means finding the bit of truth in the person's perspective or situation, verifying the facts. Okay, it doesn't mean that you agree with absolutely everything they're saying. It doesn't mean you agree with absolutely everything that they're feeling. It just means that you're agreeing with some of it. Okay, so trying to validate what is valid from their perspective. So you might say things like, I can see why you're angry. You might not agree with them, but you can say, I can see why you're angry, or I understand why you feel like that. That must be really difficult. So you're acknowledging the person's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. You're acknowledging them. You're just saying, I understand that. Okay. So, and you're also saying that you feel this way for a reason. So these behaviors, thoughts, what the person is doing are understandable. They're there for a reason. So maybe saying something like, I'd be angry if I was in your situation, or I understand that must be really especially hard for you, given that's what happened to you before. Okay, so really just validating what the person is saying, trying to step into their shoes and see what they have done or said, what they are feeling, and what you can agree with from that. You don't have to agree with all of it, but just saying, I see where you're coming from. I understand why you feel that way. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily agreeing with the other person. You can be in the middle of an argument, you can agree with what they're saying, but you can say, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I understand why you're angry. Even if you don't agree that you've done something wrong, you can say, I understand why you're angry. Okay. And it can be really helpful, because when you're in an argument with people and you're both like that at each other, you tend to really invalidate each other, and you both get into these positions. You put your, you stick to your guns more and more and more and say, I'm not going to listen, I don't understand. And obviously this just ramps up the fight. So just stop, pause, take a break, and just validating where that person is coming from can be really helpful. Okay. So again, if you look at the top, what valid means, you're only validating what is actually valid. You don't have to validate everything, just validate what you kind of can agree with, that, that they feel this way, that's valid, that makes sense. You don't have to agree with everything, okay? So if you'll notice when we talk about target behaviors, we'll say, it makes sense you felt that way. We're validating the emotion. We're not validating the target behavior. We're validating the emotion that maybe fueled it. Okay. So if you go down there to why validate, so why should you validate others? So I've kind of hinted a little bit at this already. So it improves our relationships. It shows that we're listening. It shows that we are understanding. It really can be a really powerful tool in any relationships, whether that's romantic partners or family or friends or co-workers. It really can just help. It's a really important tool. It also helps you in terms of your interpersonal effectiveness, helps you be assertive, helps you stick up for yourself, but also have good relationships with others. Because it doesn't reduce that kind of pressure to prove who's right. Like I said, when you're in this argument, you're going kind of back and forth, I'm right, I'm wrong. It's not about that, okay? And it gets over this kind of negative, maybe, reactions that maybe you get into, especially if you're kind of angry, where you're kind of saying, you always do this, you always do that. And it really helps with anger as well. So if you think back to the last time someone did something that maybe made you feel really angry, you probably felt quite invalidated. So you probably felt like they didn't get it, they didn't see where you're coming from, they weren't looking at it from your perspective. Okay, and that really ramps up the anger, because it's like, it makes you think maybe they don't care, or they don't understand, they don't get it. Okay, whenever you get those thoughts, you're probably being invalidated. When you validate someone, it really helps bring down that tension and anger, okay? Because you are saying, I understand you're angry. I see where you're coming from. It makes sense, okay? So it helps bring you together and work collaboratively. So it helps with compromises, okay? Reduces conflict. And it can also help you with problem solving, help you feel closer to others, definitely feel kind of closer. People feel like you understand them. And it's easier to kind of get support as well. So you'll understand, if you ring for phone coaching, validation will really help you kind of get support if they just ring and say, I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry that's happened. And invalidation really hurts. It hurts you, it hurts other people, and it can really cause rifts in your relationships, okay? So you've just looked down here to important things to validate. So validate what is valid, only what's valid, validate that the person is thinking that way, the person is feeling that way. You don't have to validate kind of everything that they're saying if you don't necessarily agree with it. Just validate the fact of the situation. So it might just be, I'm sorry that we're having this argument. I understand you're busy at the moment. Validate their experiences, how they're feeling, their thoughts, their beliefs. So it might be, I understand you're feeling angry now. I know that you think about things in a different way. For example, they might be religious and you're not. So it's just saying, I understand that you see this in a different way because of your religious beliefs, or I understand you have a political difference here. I understand you think about things differently there. And validate their suffering and their difficulties. I'm sorry that is really difficult. That is a problem. I know that this is painful for you right now. And it's very easy for all of us to rush into problem solving, right? We all do that. And we sometimes do this as health professionals, and we have to be really careful not to do this. So for example, someone says, I've got this problem, and you rush into problem solving. Oh, let's see if we can do this, that kind of thing. And often we go into saying, at least, so I lost my job. At least you got a redundancy package, okay? And I think that any sentence which starts with the words at least is quite invalidating, okay? Because at least you're saying that it isn't that bad, really, okay? And we do it with the best intentions. We all do it. We all do it to try and make people feel better. But actually, sometimes it's not helpful to rush into problem solving. Sometimes you do just need to sit with someone with their difficulty, with their pain, and just say, I am sorry, it's really difficult. That must be really hard. You don't have to have all the answers, actually. Just saying you get it, you understand, can be powerful in itself. So just go down to the bottom there, remember. So again, this is page 53. So remember that every invalid response makes sense in some way. So even you might not completely agree with what someone is saying, you might disagree with how they view a situation, but for them it maybe makes sense. So it's just trying to see it from that person's point of view. Okay. Validation doesn't necessarily mean agreeing. You know, I understand you're frustrated about this, even if you don't agree with it. You know, you might be having a conflict at work and you think that this new rule is a good idea, they disagree. You can say, I understand this is frustrating for you, even if you feel like this is the best idea. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean you like it, okay? You can validate someone even if you don't like it. And only validate what you kind of is valid, okay? Only validate what kind of makes sense. You don't have to validate absolutely everything, but just validate where they're coming from, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Really helps reduce that tension, reduce the conflict with others. So here are some useful phrases you might use to validate. You might want to write these down. So, I understand. I understand you feel like this. It makes sense. It makes sense that you feel like this. I can see. I can see where you're coming from. I can see why you're angry with me. I know you feel. So I know you feel this way. You don't have to agree with it, what they're feeling, but I know you feel that way. I understand it. I can see where you're coming from. Okay. So what would be useful for you just to practice this? I'm going to say a few phrases and I want you to try and write down and imagine what you could say to try to validate that. Okay. Using some of those kind of phrases. So I'm really scared. I've lost my job. I'm really worried about my health with everything that's going on. Just think about what you could write down about that. I felt really sad after we had that argument. I'm not sure what to do about my job at the moment. So just think about what kind of phrases you can say to validate that. Okay, it's really useful to practice this. Okay, now turn to page 54 in your folder, in the Interpersonal Effectiveness part of your folder. So it's a how-to guide to validation. Okay, so let's just go through this bit by bit. Number one, pay attention. Just doing that is validating. Okay, if you're not paying attention, it's not very invalidating. It's invalidating because it sends a message that you're not really paying attention, you're not really interested. So look interested, good eye contact, listen, observe. It's a really important one, no multitasking. It's quite invalidating if someone's trying to explain a problem to you and you're just kind of playing on your phone or that kind of thing, or looking around. So just focus on that person. Try and stay focused on them, okay? Just doing things like nodding. This is all validation, showing that you understand. You don't have to have all the answers, but just saying things like, that shows you care, okay? Smile when they say something good, look concerned when they say something painful. Body language does a lot, okay? You can do a lot just through body language, a lot of validation. Number two, reflect back, okay? So just try and say back what you've heard, what you observed. So it might be saying, it looks like you're really anxious at the moment, or so what you're telling me is. So not doing this in a judgmental way, just reflecting it back. So just trying to get what the person feels. So just trying to reflect back. Be open-minded. So You're not disagreeing, you're not debating it, you're not trying to change the person's mind. You're just trying to check the facts, okay? You're just trying to say, is this how it feels? So, example, so are you mad at me because you think I lied to get back at you? Did I get that right? So you can just say, so it sounds like you're quite cross at me at the moment because I didn't return your call. Is that right? So you don't have to, you're not trying to challenge, you're not trying to disagree, you're just saying, sounds like this, is that right? Have I got it right? Number 3, try and read minds, okay? So, not literally obviously, but try to be sensitive to what is not being said by the other person, not just what they're saying, but not what they're not saying. So again, facial expressions, body language, what is happening. You know, someone might say to you, I'm fine, and they're kind of not looking at you and they're looking like that. So just noticing what they haven't said. So example here, so when you're asking a friend for a lift at the end of a long day and the person slumps down, and just go, you can get, okay, you're really tired, I'll ask someone else for help. You know, someone might say yes, but they say it in a way which suggests that actually what they're saying and what they're really feeling are two different things. So just noticing what they're saying in their body language and how they're saying it. You know? So you might be say, I know you said yes, but I'm just sensing that maybe you're not really okay with this. Number 4, understand. Just try and look for how the other person feels, how they're thinking, and just saying that it makes sense given that person's history, given that's what happened to them before. So, you know, I can understand this is hurtful because of what's happened to you in the past, or given that they're feeling anxious, given the state of their body. So I know this must be really hard because you're in pain at the moment, or because you're prone to feeling depressed. So even if you don't approve of what they've done, you know, same as us with talking to you about target behaviors, we don't want you to do a target behavior, we don't want you to self-harm, but the emotion that led up to it is valid, okay? So even if you don't agree what they've done, if you're having an argument, someone says something really nasty, you don't have to agree with what they've said, but you can say, for example, you know, I understand you were angry, I understand you felt hurt, and it's not okay to do that. But it really helps just to validate that person. You're validating what led up to it, not that actual problem behavior. Acknowledge the valid, number 5. So show that you see that the person's thoughts, feelings, actions are valid, given what's reality, current events. So act as if the person's behavior is valid. So the example here, if you're criticized for not taking out the rubbish on your day, admit that it is your day and take it out. If people present a problem, try and help them solve it, unless they just want to be heard. You know, so acknowledge the effort the person is making, and just try and see that the person's thoughts, feelings, actions are valid. Just validate what's valid. Number 6, show equality. Okay, so it's not about competition, it's not about who's right or wrong, and that's quite hard to get your head around, but just trying to notice. So don't try and one up the other person or get on top or take the moral high ground. You're just noticing. So be willing to admit mistakes. You know, if someone introduces you by the wrong name, for example, ask other people for their opinions. It's not about being defensive, okay? You're just trying to validate what that person is going through. And it's really important to try and validate yourself as well. So we often get into the habit of thinking I shouldn't feel this way, or I don't know why this is such a problem for me. So you try and think and say these things to yourself. It's okay for me to feel sad, you know, given what's happening in the world at the moment. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel a bit lonely. A lot of people will be feeling that way. So look through these tips about validation and try them. That is your homework for this week, is I want you to practice some of these validation phrases with people, okay? I know given social distancing at the moment, you might not have as much face-to-face as usual, but even over a text, even over a phone call, FaceTime, whatever it is, just try and validate using some of these techniques what's happening. And what would be really good as well is try and write down some key phrases, like I said, that help you validate other people. All right, look after yourself. Take care.